everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Travis on Sports podcast, where I discuss the latest news from around the sports world. As always, I'm your host, Travis Tyler. I'm a freelance sports writer, a sports blogger, and really just love talking about sports and trying to make a career in sports media. You can find some of my work at the ultimatesportsnetworks.com or the footballsavant.com, and I also cover some high school football games in the Dallas area during high school football season. Today is Thursday, January 27th, 2022, and we'll be discussing the NFL playoffs, the latest coaching and GM hires and rumors and such in the NFL, a coach surprisingly stepping down earlier this week, some other player retirement rumors, the latest from the MLB Lockout, the latest from the MLB Hall of Fame class that was just announced the other day, college basketball, and some more coaching hires for the reboot of the USFL. Last weekend was probably one of the most entertaining NFL playoff weekends we've had in a long time. 3 of the 4 games came down to field goals as time expired. Technically, if you're counting the tying field goal in the Kansas City game, all 4 of them did, but all 4 of them at least came down to the final possession. We'll start with the first game of the weekend, which was Cincinnati at Tennessee. The Bengals upset the Titans 19-16. Despite the Titans getting Derrick Henry back, we did know that Cincinnati had a pretty good run defense, but they were also missing one of their starting D tackles in Larry Ogunjobi. But the other D tackle, DJ Reader, had a great game shutting down the Tennessee run game and really helped the Bengals out on defense there. Joe Burrow once again went over 300 yards passing, but both teams really struggled to score. The final score was 19-16 Cincinnati. I mentioned last week when I was previewing the game, Ryan Tannehill has to be more careful with taking care of the ball and really hone in on that game manager role. He didn't really do that in this one. He threw 3 interceptions. And the big one was thrown. Tennessee had the ball with 20 seconds left, and he was intercepted by Cincinnati, which gave the Bengals a chance to get in position to win the game with 20 seconds left. And they wound the clock down, and Evan McPherson, the rookie kicker, made a heck of a kick to win the game. The other game that was on Saturday was the San Francisco and Green Bay game. Ugly, yet entertaining game in Lambeau there. Not many people were giving the Niners a chance, and for most of the game that looked like that was the exact correct take. But Green Bay went down, scored on its first possession, scored a touchdown. Then they held San Francisco to just 3 points for most of the game, well into the fourth quarter. But after that first possession, both offenses struggled to move the ball, and the defenses combined for 9 sacks in this game, which is a very high total. San Francisco's offense wasn't able to score a touchdown in this game. The only touchdown the 49ers got came with, I think it was like 4 minutes left on a blocked punt in the fourth quarter, tied the game up at 10. The Niners then forced Green Bay to go 3 and out on the next series, and then had a pretty methodical drive down to bleed the clock out and let Robbie Gould kick an impressive field goal through those the wintry elements there at Lambeau Field to send them to the NFC Championship game. They were going to play the winner of the Rams and the Buccaneers, which was a rematch of a game from earlier this year, which had been a close game, but this time was basically the opposite. The Rams jumped out to a 20-3 lead and looked like they were going to run away with it in a blowout win. But then in the second half, the turnovers hit. The Rams fumbled 3 times in the second half. The Buccaneers turned 2 of those into touchdowns and suddenly were right within striking distance. And those fumbles, whether it was one they converted on or not, seemed to give Tampa new life and more energy and more of an edge on their defense and make things harder for Matthew Stafford and the Rams offense. But the most costly of the fumbles was probably the Cam Akers fumble as the Rams were trying to run out the clock. He looked to have a solid run up the middle, set up a 3rd and short, and the Rams would have had a chance to run a play, pick up the first down, and basically end the game from there. But Ndamukong Suh came up and punched the ball out from behind. Tampa recovered on the LA 30 and took 7 plays to score from there. The Rams got the ball back with not much time left, but as a lot of us Lions fans have seen him do, particularly in that Minnesota game where Matt Prater hit the 61-yard field goal to send it to overtime. He made the throws he needed to and led his team down the field, but this was really the first time you had gotten to see it live on the national stage. And so they picked up a first down, and then he uncorked a beautiful pass down the middle of the field to Cooper Kupp that set them up for the game-winning kick. They clocked the ball, and Matt Gay made the kick against his former team and sent the Rams to the NFC Championship, and they will be the host team for the NFC Championship. Buffalo, Kansas City was probably the most entertaining game of the weekend. You can sign me up for a lot more of these games, and you're going to see a lot more of them with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes dueling it out for the foreseeable future. They're two of the elite quarterbacks in the new generation of the NFL, with other guys retiring. They continue to rise up the ranks, and when these two teams play each other, it tends to bring out the best in both these quarterbacks. Kansas City beat Buffalo in last year's AFC Championship game, so you knew Buffalo had revenge on the mind, was going to do everything they could to win this one, and it resulted in one of the craziest playoff games ever. Teams were neck and neck for the first three quarters. Kansas City took a 23-21 lead into the fourth quarter, and we'll pick up with the final 2 minutes of the game. Actually, the final 154, Kansas City was up 26-21. And Buffalo had a 4th and 13 from the Kansas City 27. A lot of yardage to pick up. If the Chiefs make that stop, they get the ball and the game's basically over. But Bills wide receiver Gabriel Davis made a move on a defender that got the defender to fall to the ground and left him wide open in the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown. Bills went for 2 to make it a 3-point game, and Stephon Diggs made a great catch in the back of the end zone to convert the 2-point conversion. That you would think Buffalo was in a good position to win there, but it only took Kansas City 5 plays to get that one back. Tyreek Hill flew right past the Bills' defense and carved them up for a 64-yard touchdown, even threw up deuces on the way in, and put Kansas City back in front 33-29. Bills had just over a minute to answer, and it only took them 49 seconds, which apparently was still too quickly. And Davis came up with a couple big catches on that drive, but his biggest catch was by far his 4th receiving touchdown of the game that came with 13 seconds left, which gave him the record for touchdown receptions in a playoff game. And like I said, 13 seconds doesn't seem like it's a lot of time, but it was plenty of time for the Chiefs. They had a couple timeouts. They used Hill's speed to pick up 19 quick yards. They called a timeout. And then they got another 25 from Travis Kelce to make the game-tying attempt easy. They spiked the ball. Kick is good. Go to overtime. Chiefs win the toss, go down and score, and win a crazy one to go back to the AFC title game. The finish of this game brought up some of the issues with the overtime rules, and yeah, the overtime system in the NFL is flawed, but I don't know if we're going to see any change coming. I mean, a field goal wouldn't have won the game by NFL rules. It would have given Buffalo a chance to answer, but at the same time, you knew whoever got the ball probably wasn't going to end up kicking a field goal. Yet it's still pretty anticlimactic that the team that was on defense first, in this case it ended up being Buffalo, didn't get a chance to respond in overtime with the way that game had gone and with how entertaining that game had been, especially the last 2 minutes. And while there's probably some changes needed, we'll really have to see if this causes the league to take a chance to step back and reevaluate those overtime rules like it did with the pass interference rules and replay review rules after the Saints and Rams pass interference fiasco in the NFC Championship a few years ago. So this week will be the conference championship games, and then we'll have a week off, and then we will have the Super Bowl, and that will be the end of the NFL season. The AFC Championship is up first on Sunday. Cincinnati's traveling to Kansas City. It's the Bengals' first AFC title game since 1988 when they lost the Super Bowl to the San Francisco 49ers. Meanwhile, the Chiefs are making their 4th straight appearance in the game. It's a classic battle between a somewhat younger team that their veterans are younger than most veterans, and the Kansas City Chiefs that have accomplished a lot, and even younger team that's just getting its footing and just finding its identity. They have, in the Bengals, they have the young linebacker on defense with Logan Wilson. They have some younger defensive linemen, Sam Hubbard, Larry Ogunjobi, DJ Reader, Trey Hendrickson. I know Ogunjobi's out for the season, apparently. And Jesse Bates, the safety, has become a really good player. They have some pieces on that side of the ball, and then they obviously have Joe Mixon at running back, Joe Burrow at quarterback. They've got all those receivers. They got C.J. Uzomah, underrated tight end. The biggest issue for Cincinnati is their offensive line. Teams get a ton of pressure on Joe Burrow. Somehow they won that game last week after giving up 9 sacks, but you're not going to beat Kansas City by playing that way. It's got to get cleaned up. These two teams also did meet during Week 17 in Cincinnati, and the Bengals won that game. At the end, they actually went for it on a fourth down instead of kicking an easy go-ahead field goal. And going for it on fourth down actually led to penalties on Kansas City, giving them a first and goal and a new set of downs, a chance to run the clock out, which they did, and they kicked a field goal as time expired. Again, that was Cincinnati at home. Playing at Arrowhead is a completely different animal. A lot of players will say it's the toughest road environment to play in the NFL. It's loud, it's cold, and the Chiefs have a lot of skill on their team. I think this is going to be a very exciting game to watch. Kansas City win further cements the legacy of the Andy Reid era, the Mahomes era, and players like Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey. And a Cincinnati win shows that there is yet another young team to be reckoned with in the AFC other than Kansas City and Buffalo, because that core of the Cincinnati team is going to be together for a while. The other championship game is the NFC Championship game. San Francisco will visit the LA Rams. It's not the game you were expecting to see, I don't think. The 4th seed Rams are the host team to the 6th seed 49ers. 3 seed Dallas, 2 seed Tampa, and 1 seed Green Bay are all out. So, therefore, the Rams are the highest remaining seed. Obviously, 7 seed Philadelphia and 5 seed Arizona are also eliminated, just to tie up any loose ends there. San Francisco coming off of 2 straight road upsets in Dallas and Green Bay, and they've also won 6 straight games over the Rams. The 49ers offense isn't overly impressive. They've just done just enough, and last week they really didn't do enough at all, except for the final drive, I guess you could consider was just enough to get in position for that game-winning field goal. But it's really their defense that has shown up to keep them in games and get the job done. The Rams are starting to click again on both sides of the ball. They've struggled on offense against San Francisco a couple times this year. While San Francisco has had better offense against the Rams than most other teams that they've played against, and they'll need to have that happen once again. The offensive effort output that they had last week in Green Bay is not going to fly in this one. It's also an intriguing matchup of offensive gurus, and their head coach is Kyle Shanahan for San Francisco, Sean McVay for the Rams, and it's also an interdivision rivalry with NFC West teams. Further endorsement of the accomplishments of both teams this year. Not only did they make it to the NFC Championship, but they clearly play in one of the best divisions, since no other division in the NFC is left standing, and the Cardinals were also a 3rd team in that division to make the playoffs. Usually don't do game picks, but it's so close to the end of the year. I'm going to go with the Chiefs and the Rams this time around. Should be playing in LA in a couple weeks. Other NFL news, the Carolina Panthers have found a new offensive coordinator, hiring former Giants offensive coordinator and head coach Ben McAdoo. McAdoo was the Giants offensive coordinator in 2014 and 2015 and became the head coach in 2016, but only lasted 2 seasons as the head coach. A lot of Giants fans don't have fond memories of McAdoo, but important to remember that's mostly from his head coaching days. He wasn't a terrible offensive coordinator. His offenses were 13th and 6th in scoring in his 2 years as their offensive coordinator, which is